A week. So we're hopefully coming out of Corona lockdown. We're slowly re-engaging with life on some level of normalcy. And then the horrific murder of George Floyd and the demonstrations and the riots and the looting, and we're just being hit on all sides. We're trying to make sense of this. What lessons do we learn from this? How can we change this? How can we change this level of anger and frustration and hurt that's erupting in so many places in the country? And what do we have to learn from this? So I think this week's Parsha is actually the perfect Parsha. It's amazing how when you're God, you could work this out. The things happen at exactly the right times. This week's Parsha, Parshas Naso, contains messages that are very, very important for us in making sense of this, learning from it, and bringing change. The Parsha begins with Naso et Rosh. Elevate, lift up the head. In other words, the Torah is referring to counting. We're counting and we're appointing, we're giving different families within the tribe of Levi, within the Shevet of Levi, their different appointments, the amount of people that they are, of adult males, and their roles. And the pasuk says, Naso es Rosh, which literally means elevate the head, elevate them. In other words, what we want in life is living a great life means living a life that when people come in contact with me, they're transformed. They're not the same people as they were before they spoke to me. We don't want anyone in the street that we say good morning to, that we notice. These days, I'm doing a lot of walks on the street, and my hope is that those people that see me on the street that I wave and I say hello to and I acknowledge, they're not the same people as they were before that. If I engage in a little conversation with somebody helping me check out at Tom Thumb, if I'm going out to get my tires replaced at Discount Tires or wherever it might be, I hope these interactions are elevating. That's what we want to get to in life. People interact with us and they're bigger, they're greater. They're not the same people that they were before. That's what we want to get to. I want to tell you a story that I experienced, two stories I experienced in my life with this exact type of interaction. I had the privilege of studying in the Mir Yeshiva, the great yeshiva, the largest yeshiva in the world, 7,500 students. In my day, it was much smaller. And I had the privilege of studying there for 3.5 years, and it really was a privilege. It was a life-changing experience. If you're listening to this and you have children of high school age and you're able to send them to Israel on a gap year to study yeshiva or whatever the experience is, send them. It's transformational. So I was in the yeshiva for 3.5 years, and the Rosh Yeshiva, the Dean of the yeshiva, was the famous Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, the holy Rav Nosson Tzvi, who was just an unbelievable person. He took over the yeshiva. He already had Parkinson's disease in his mid-40s. And people assumed he would not be a particularly active Rosh Yeshiva, already middle-aged with Parkinson's. What could he do? But he took the yeshiva by storm, and he took the yeshiva from a yeshiva of about 1,000 students to close to 7,000 upon his passing, a little over 20 years later. And he never stopped pushing people for greatness, pushing more people to come study. And it meant that he had to raise a lot of money, all the while being weakened by Parkinson's. And as it developed further, each year he would travel to the United States for a week. And during that week, he would have to raise millions of dollars. And the week would culminate with the Mir Yeshiva dinner with hundreds and hundreds of people, of parents, of alumni coming to celebrate. And he would come back each year exhausted but invigorated from what the amazing things he accomplished when he was in the United States. And I remember greeting him when he would come back. But the year that I went back to the United States, I got to see it from the other side. You see, I went back to the United States in right before Pesach, right before Passover of 1996. And my intention was to begin dating with the intention of getting married and beginning a family and moving on in life. But in order for that to happen, the proper young woman has to materialize and has to agree to date you and agree to marry you. And it wasn't so simple. A year went by, and I'd been waiting for Miss Right and Miss Perfect. And I went out with different people. Some of them I didn't think was appropriate for me. Some of them did not think I was appropriate for them. And I was still single a year later. The shadchan hadn't called yet with the perfect shidduch, with the perfect match. And I was a little bit down. I was already almost 25 years old, and things were not progressing as well as I thought they would. People weren't banging down the doors wanting to date me. And I met Reb Nosson Tzvi, the Rosh Yeshiva, who had the privilege of being close to when I was in the yeshiva. I met him. He had come in for that week to fundraise. And I still remember where I was, the shul I was in. I went over to him and I said, I'm gonna share something really deep and insightful with him. And I said, I want to share a shtickle Torah with the Rosh Yeshiva. It means a thesis in Gemara with him. And I shared, it wasn't really my idea. I had put it together. I had heard from others. Maybe I put a little bit of my own thought into it as well. And I shared the thesis with him. And he looked me straight in the eye and listened as I developed the concept. And then he looked me in the eye and he said things I'll never forget. He said, it was worth coming to the United States just to hear this thought. Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel, weakened by Parkinson's, so much on his mind, a whole yeshiva of thousands of students, so much money he had to raise, so much he had to accomplish, and he takes the time to look me in the eye and say, it was worth all the difficulty and all the hassle of traveling here for a week, away from family, away from the yeshiva, away from everyone waiting for him, just to hear my thought. That's Nasoas Rosh. That's being elevated. That's the elevation that we're talking about. Wow, did I feel powerful then. Suddenly it was like those girls that said no to me. Who cares? Suddenly, all the challenges, it's nothing. Reb Nosson Tzvi said, my shtickle Torah, my thesis is worthy of traveling thousands of miles just to hear. Wow. I felt elevated. And you know what? I wanted to sit down and learn more. But I want to tell you another story. A story that happened when I was even younger. I had the merit of growing up in an amazing shul, as many of you who know me have heard, called the Mir Minyan, of men who studied in the Mir Yeshiva in pre-World War II Europe. And one of the men there was Reb Aaron Kreiser. Reb Aaron Kreiser, anyone who knew him knew that he was this awesome, deep Talmud Chacham, this Torah scholar, this lion of Torah, who loved Torah and loved Jews. And I grew up there. I remember seeing him, and he would always be very encouraging of me as a person, encouraged me to study Torah. And then around my bar mitzvah, he moved to Lakewood, New Jersey. And I met him shortly after my bar mitzvah, and he said, you have to come to me for a Shabbos. I want you to come spend Shabbos with me and my wife. And he started a campaign. He would send messages to me, different people, come for Shabbos. And his thought process was, I'll come to him for Shabbos, and he'll inspire me to study Torah seriously. He'll inspire me to grow as a person. But I was a 13-year-old. I wasn't sure that I was ready to do that. I wanted to go and have fun. If anything, I wanted to go to my aunt to watch television. I wasn't sure I wanted to go to the rabbi to study Torah over a weekend. But eventually he wore me down. And when I was in 10th grade, the end of 10th grade, I decided I agreed to go. But I was going to make the most of it. I told my rabbis in yeshiva, I'm going to Reb Aaron Kreiser for Shabbos. And they said, wow, Reb Aaron Kreiser, the awesome Torah scholar, you're going to him for Shabbos? Be sure to share with us everything that he tells you over Shabbos. We're waiting to hear. So I go confidently, and I show up in his apartment, and he jumps up and he gives me a big hug. He was an older man at the time. He must have been about 70 years old with a long white beard. Gives me a hug and he sits me down. He starts telling me how much he loves my father. And my father's like a brother to him. And he's so ecstatic that I'm there with him. And then the moment of reckoning came. Reb Aaron turned to me and he said, Nu, zog a shtickle Torah. Tell me a shtickle Torah. Tell me a thesis in Gemara. I'm like, what is going on over here? I'm a 15-year-old thinking about having fun. You expect me to develop a shtickle Torah? There's silence. I have nothing to say. Finally, after a very, very long 5 seconds of silence, he says, Nu, tell me a good kasha. Tell me a good question that you had on Gemara. Tell me something deep. And there's silence. He says, Nu, tell me something your Rebbe. Tell me something your teacher taught you in Gemara class. Share something. Painful silence. I'm turning red. I'm being embarrassed. Finally, Reb Aaron realized who he was dealing with, and he says, all right, what tractate, what Masechta of Gemara you're learning? And I tell him, he says, what chapter? I tell him the chapter. I was learning Meruba, the 7th chapter in Baba Kama. He says, okay, and he starts teaching me a very important concept there in Gemara with different commentaries. And he's teaching me from the bottom up. I went back after Shabbos. My Rebbe asked me on Sunday or Monday, no, what did Reb Aaron say? And I was like, wow. I didn't even know what to tell him. I was holding at such a level I couldn't repeat anything. I kind of politely ducked out of it. But I said to myself, I'm going back, and I'm going back prepared. And I spent the next 6 months studying, learning, and preparing. And I arranged, my mother called the Kreisers, Rebbetzin Kreiser, and we arranged that I was going to go back for Shabbos in November. And boy, did I spend my time preparing. I came with a list of questions, of thoughts. Some of them were my own, some were from my Rebbeim, from my teachers. Thoughts I'd seen elsewhere, difficulties that I was grappling with in Gemara. And I came in, and Reb Aaron was so happy to see me. And whenever there was a break in the action during the Shabbos meal, I'd say, well, what about this in the Gemara? What about that and this? And I'll never forget, we were walking down the steps to the street after the meal, and I started peppering him with more questions. And he says, wait. And he looks at me with a big smile. And Reb Aaron says, look how much you've grown. Appreciate how much you've grown. Look how much you've grown. Wow. Did I feel big? Did I feel elevated? That's Naso Es Rosh. That's Naso Es Rosh. That's the greatness that we have to bring out in people with our interactions with them. The Parsha goes further to a very perplexing story of the Sota. The Sota is the woman whose husband accuses her of inappropriate behavior, and there's a whole process of how she's dealt with. She denies the behavior, but she's given specific instructions not to spend time with a man that she's accused of acting inappropriately with, and she doesn't. She violates the warning that she's given, and she goes. And then there's a whole process after of clarifying which way it goes. And there's a tractate in Gemara, there's a Masechta in Gemara, Sota, that discusses the laws of this. And the Mishnah begins, the first Mishnah, the first words of tractate Sota begin with Hamakana Leishto. Somebody who gets jealous of his wife, in other words, he begins the process of accusing her of wrongdoing. To which the Gemara says, the implication of somebody who becomes jealous is that not that you should become jealous. Di'evedin lechatchila lo. That it's only if it happened that he became jealous and he began the process, but we wouldn't advise him to begin that process. Why not? He feels his wife has done something inappropriate. Why not go ahead and begin this process? I want to share a thought that I heard with you this week, a beautiful thought. What do we see in other people? Nobody's perfect, and sometimes people are grossly imperfect, but what do we see? Do we see the negative behavior, or do we see the beautiful person? Or do we see the pain? Or do we see the desire to do what's right that's falling short? What do we see? That's what the Gemara is saying. You look at somebody and you see what's wrong with them. Well, that's what's wrong. What's wrong is not with the other person. What's wrong is with you. Why are you seeing negativity in the other person? See it in the context of the positive. See what's good as well. There was a Rosh Hashiva who I admire greatly. Unfortunately, I did not have the privilege of getting to know him personally, but I watched him from the distance, and I have the greatest respect for him. His name was Rav Shmuel Birnbaum. He was the Rosh Hashiva of the Mir Yeshiva in Brooklyn, a holy Jew who studied Torah with zest and vibrancy every minute of the day till he passed away, close to 90 years old. But Rav Shmuel Birnbaum also was as passionate as he was about Torah study. He was equally passionate about loving and inspiring Jews. There's a yeshiva in New Jersey. I don't know if it still exists, but it was a yeshiva geared to boys who had not found the beauty of Torah study. And they were not anxious to study. They were troublemakers. They would go out and do what they were not supposed to do. And the yeshiva was geared to try to love them and inspire them. And this yeshiva invited Rav Shmuel Birnbaum to come speak to them. Now, keep in mind, Rav Shmuel Birnbaum, just to give you a little historical context, he was born in Europe in about 1920. He studied in the yeshivas in Europe. He came to the United States as an adult, and he spent his entire life studying and teaching Torah. Needless to say, his English was imperfect and heavily accented. And not only that, he was not living in the year 2000. He was living in a block Gemara, a page of Gemara, and he knew very little about the world out there. So they invited him to come speak, not sure what he would say. And he got up there. I heard this from a friend of mine who was there at the time. And he said, Bachram, students of this yeshiva, he named the yeshiva, I love you very much. I love you so much. And then he stopped. He said, why do I love you so much? He said, because there are temptations out there. There's candy stores. There's pinball machines. It shows how out of touch he was. But he said, there's all these temptations out there. And you come to study Torah? I love you. These boys were not on a high level of Gemara. They were lower than the level I was in 10th grade. They couldn't tell a shtickle Torah. They couldn't say a kasher. They couldn't say a thought from their rabbi. They couldn't say any of that. They were just holding on for dear life. But what did Shmuel Birnbaum see in them? He saw their desire. He saw some level of commitment, and that's what he was going to focus on. Hamekana leishto, becoming jealous of his wife, angry at his wife. That's what's all wrong. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but why do you notice that? Why don't you notice what's right? You know, there's a book in a business motivation for CEOs called Finding People Doing Things Right. I don't remember the exact name. I think it's written by Kenneth Blanchard. I don't remember the exact title, but that's the thesis. The theory of the book is find your employees doing things right. It's easy to find them doing things wrong. I remember we once had somebody working for us many years ago, and we were trying to work on a program, and the person was finding all the reasons why the program wouldn't work. And finally I said, I didn't hire you to tell me why things won't work. I hired you to find ways to make things work. But it's the same thing in life. Find ways to help people succeed in life by finding what they're doing right, by encouraging them. How do we get the strength to do that? Right after the discussion of the Sota, the next discussion in the Parsha is about the Nazir. The Nazir is somebody who takes a vow. He or she will not drink wine, will not come in contact with a dead body, will not cut their hair for a period of time. And the concept is they want to spiritually elevate themselves. And that's why they're doing this. They're taking control of their urges. Wine represents the urge for physical and all that comes along with it. And the person wants to elevate themselves, they're going to distance themselves from that. So the Talmud, the Gemara asks, why is the discussion of the Nazir coming on the heels of the story of the Sota? And the answer the Gemara gives is because somebody sees what happened to the Sota, they got to take the lesson to their lives and say, I better stop drinking wine. Seemingly you saw the Sota who acted inappropriately. It should make such a negative impact on you. And all the negativity that comes to her as a result. Why do I have to take a step? Why do I have to separate myself from wine? Just the knowledge that there are people out there should be enough to say, I'm not going to be like them. Says one of the great thinkers, the Torah thinkers of the 20th century, Rabbi Rucham Levovitz. He says, because we're that woman. We think that woman who acted inappropriately, who had an affair, God forbid, or did something grossly wrong, we think, she's out there. What does that have to do to us? You know what? We're just a couple of steps away from being her. We're almost there. And if I don't take the lesson to heart, and if I don't learn from this lesson and implement change in my life, I'm in imminent danger, God forbid. God forbid I'm in danger of falling. Don't deify how terrible that person is. Look how terrible they are. Look how disgusting it is. No. I have to look inside myself. If I came to see that experience, there's a lesson for me. And the lesson for me is that I think I'm this great holy person. I could fall in a second just like anybody else. And therefore, if somebody else fell, I have to look and see how can I make sure not to become that person. A number of months ago, I got a desperate WhatsApp message from a rabbi. There are a number of rabbis around the country on this WhatsApp group, and this rabbi posted. It was a tragic situation. A prominent rabbi fell spiritually in a very grossly inappropriate behavior. And it was terrifying to this rabbi. He's like, how can we talk about that? We don't become that rabbi. And that's the attitude to have. I can't have an attitude that, I'm safe. I'm in the ivory tower. I'm someplace else. No. I'm in as much danger as the next person. If I don't take those steps, I'm in danger. I tell everyone they should have a cell phone with a filter. Of course, everyone can get around their filters. People who've put the filters on their phone have told me how they're able to get around their filters. But you know what? It creates a little bit of an awareness, a little bit of thought before I do something that I shouldn't. And hopefully that'll remind me, do I really want to go there? Do I really want to be this person? Is that who I want to be? I need to take steps to protect myself. I need to find ways to ensure that I'm not going to get there. The Torah talks, many years ago, I was having a lunch meeting with a pastor. And this pastor is a pastor of a church that has 6,500 members. I said, how do you keep up with 6,500 members? I have 100 families, maybe a little more than that. I struggle. Just today I was thinking I didn't speak to this one or that one, and I ran to call them when I had a minute of quiet. How do you keep up with 6,500 people? He said, well, after services Sunday morning, I walk around, I shake hands with everybody. I said, that's it? He said, well, I have my assistant with me, and anyone wants to meet with me, we immediately set up a meeting. I said, you go to their home to meet with them? He said, oh, never. I never go to anyone's home. I said, why not? He said, all I need is one woman to accuse me of something inappropriate and my career's over. I said, well, let me teach you two concepts in Jewish law. One is there's a concept of yichud. Yichud is a man is not allowed to be alone with a woman who's not his mother, spouse, sibling, child, grandparent, grandchild. You're not allowed to be alone with them in a room. In other words, you can't be alone in a home where nobody else is there. Mike Pence made that famous recently. People laughed at Mike Pence, but I think that it's very wise. That's the wisdom of the Torah. Yichud, be careful. Don't be alone with somebody of the other gender. Things happen. And you might say, what's going to happen now? I'm 18 years old and the woman's 95. Well, maybe the next time it won't be 18 and 95. We have to be careful. There's a second halacha. A man is not supposed to have physical contact, even any physical contact, with a woman who, again, is not one of those close relatives. Now, there's a question. What if it's a business dealing? The woman sticks out her hand. Okay, there are questions about it. But the idea is that distance. There should be a certain distance because I'm human and I have my own frailties and weaknesses. And there can be situations that turn into compromising situations very carefully. Very, very, very quickly. They can fall to those situations. I need to be careful. That's the message of this parsha. If I start with Noso as Rosh, I elevate people. My interactions with people are interactions of elevation, of inspiration, of seeing what's right in them. I'm not finding what's wrong in them. Even when the wrong is there, I'm not finding what's wrong. I'm finding what's right. There's such a beautiful story that a man, a great activist for Judaism, told people. He said, what was the moment that put me on the path of making a difference with Jews and not just becoming absorbed in my own life? He said, I studied in yeshiva. And I was in yeshiva high school. And it was in New York City. It was the Torah Vodaas Yeshiva. And in New York City, at the end of the year, each year in high school, you have to take the regents. You have to take these exams that decide whether you go to the next grade. And those regents are very important. And there's a natural desire, like maybe I'll cheat. Maybe I'll cheat. I'll look on somebody else's paper, and that way I'll ensure that I'll pass. And there are proctors there who are supervising and make sure no one's cheating. And the proctor for his exam was Rav Pam. Rav Pam was a holy, holy, righteous Jew, one of the greatest tzaddikim, the holiest Jews of the last generation. And Rav Pam was proctoring the regent. And this man said about himself, he said, I was cheating. I was looking at somebody else's paper. And Rav Pam saw, and I saw that he saw. And I said, great, this is the moment of reckoning. He's going to tear up my regent. He's going to throw me out. I'm going to have to repeat the grade. I'm going to be humiliated. I'm going to leave school. I can't deal with this. What happened? Rav Pam went over to him and whispered in his ear, if you need help reading the instructions, I'll be happy to explain them to you. He knew that he cheated, and he knew that Rav Pam knew that he cheated. What did Rav Pam see? Rav Pam saw a boy that's desperate, that needs to be redirected, and he was going to redirect it. He said, that saved my life. That moment saved my life. Find what's right in other people and realize the way to do it is not by being some holy person, but realizing I'm only a few steps away from being that person in that negative behavior. So have empathy and find what's right with them and motivate them and inspire them. I believe if we do that in our relationships, the world will look different. If it's a world where the underprivileged feel looked down upon, where people feel unappreciated or unvalued, a lot of negative things can happen. I can't get up there in front of 10,000 people or more and tell them my messages and give them my viewpoints. But what I can do is I can start relating to other people in my life that way. How do I relate to the person who comes to clean my home or cut my lawn or take care of my pool? How do I relate to them? Do I relate to them as human beings? Do I relate to them as a way that I'm inspiring them? My father would do this. Every time my father would meet somebody who was graduating high school or shortly after high school, a waiter or waitress at a restaurant, somebody pumping gas at the gas station, he would always talk about, What's going to be your next step in your education? Are you going to college? And he would encourage them, go to college, get an education. You could do it. And that sense of empowerment bore fruit. People became respected people in society. People became successful in their professions. That's what we have to do. Nasoas Rosh. Elevate other people. Relate to them in a way that they feel bigger and greater after relating to you. And do that and see what's right and not what's wrong. Don't be like the husband of the Sota. And the way to do that is by being the Nazir, realizing I'm not that far away from falling. And if we do that, I believe we will truly transform the world. So Chevra, have a wonderful Shabbos. I hope I'll see in shul. Some of you will not be there because for health reasons, you're not comfortable for coming, and I completely respect that. Come visit me. I tend to sit outside my house on my front lawn most of Shabbos. I'd love nothing more than to see you. Come by, have a l'chaim with me, have a glass of water with me, study some Torah, let's just chat, let's catch up. Come inspire me and let me inspire you, and together we'll grow and make the world a better place. Good Shabbos.